And no, I'm not saying that in Spanish. I'm just saying it, Terra. Evo Terra. So, no confusion there. Okay, so I just want to introduce Evo. And Evo has been in podcasting for many years now. He was inducted into Podcast Hall of Fame in March of 2022 of this year. He's released 40 podcasts and also has written 2 books about podcasting. And he's a champion for podcast accessibility, partly because he has hearing loss himself. He is the host of podcast Pontifications, where his mission is to make podcasting better. And I would ask him what he means by that. And right now, he is focused on curating fiction podcasts called The End. And you can find all the link to that Twitter in the post below. So, welcome to the show, Evo. How are you this morning? I know it's early where you are, 7 a.m.
7 o'clock in the morning, but that's okay. I tend to be an early riser. I'm doing fine. Thanks for having me on the show.
You're welcome. Yeah, so I just want to know, first question I want to ask is, do you focus on podcast accessibility? How did that start and when did you become interested in it, considering you've been in podcasting for many years now?
Yeah, I think it's a natural progression. I don't know that there was one thing that happened. As you mentioned in my intro, I suffer from hearing loss. I'm quite fortunate. My hearing loss is mild, and it's easily correctable either through a set of very expensive hearing aids or with these very expensive studio headphones that I have placked onto my head.
Yeah,
So I can
yeah,
do my job as producing podcasting, no problem. But I think accessibility started to become a thing for me when I returned back from living overseas for a couple of years, and I was diving deeper and deeper into podcasting. And I recognize that there's a lot of shows aren't paying a lot of attention. A lot of creators of shows aren't paying attention to the overall level of sound, making sure that we can hear the dialogue. It's gotten easier and accepted more and more over time for podcasts to have interesting sound effects and lots of guests and other music that goes into it to really make a fully immersive experience. And a lot of time the audio was getting buried. The dialogue, the conversations that people were having was getting lost to the music. And that started to really resonate with me because I was having a tough time hearing it in the car or with my cheap headphones that I use to carry when I'm listening to shows. So that started me thinking down the process of, there are things we can do better. We can work on those things to make the audio sound better so that people can hear the dialogue. But also, what about people who are worse off than me, who have significant hearing loss? We now have transcripts that are available, and podcast apps supporting those, podcast hosting companies. So it's probably in the last 5 to 10 years that it's really become a really rallying cry for me, because there's no reason we now have the tools to make it better and more accessible for everyone. I just think that we should.
right. So, do you find that overall the audio quality is not as good as it should be on podcasts? Is that something that a wide ranging kind of problem in podcasting, or is it just a few podcasts that you
Hmm.
see a problem with audio quality?
Well, I think that for the popular shows that have been around for a while and have an established following and are also using professionals to create their podcasts, I see no problem with their audio, or I see much less problems with their audio. But we have millions of podcasts today. 2 million by some counts,
Right.
4 million by other counts. And a lot of people brand new to podcasting don't understand that they need to pay attention to audio, which sounds strange. But if you listen to a lot of the new shows that are out there and
Yeah.
randomly sample a podcast, chances are the person making it hasn't spent a lot of time thinking about the audio. They're using a microphone that was not designed for recording quality podcasts. They're recording in their kitchen or some other very echoey place, position 5 to 10 feet away from the microphone, like they're shouting into it, and they're
Mm.
not as into making quality standards. We don't have real true standards in podcasting. We have some assumed standards that those of us that produce podcasts professionally follow, with noise levels and making sure the dynamic range is not too much. But the standard normal person who decides, hey, I think I've always wanted to make a podcast, doesn't know how to do that. So I think it's a widespread problem that is difficult to detect if you're not really looking for it.
So if you're an indie podcaster, it's possible to have good sound quality.
Yeah.
But you have to be in a quiet room, and is but those things are affordable to start out if you want to start out in podcasting, right? There
Yeah,
are
absolutely.
affordable microphones.
Yeah, there's
All you have to
that's
be, yeah,
yeah, no,
yeah,
I'm sorry for interrupting, but you're right. That's true. A lot of people who get into podcasting brand new assume, well, I can't build a professional recording studio. I can't soundproof my room, so I'm just going to do it on the cheap. And I understand that, but the reality is, look, the room I'm podcasting in right now is not soundproofed. We don't need soundproofed rooms. We need sound conditioned rooms. And a lot of the
right.
rooms in your house are probably already conditioned. And if not, maybe you have a closet. Closets are amazing places to record podcasts because they absorb all of the echo that takes
Yeah,
place. I mean, you would be amazed how many professional podcasts, high end production podcasts, are recorded in someone's closet. It still happens today because a lot of producers, live in places like New York City where you can't afford a 5,000 square foot home on normal people's salary, but everybody's got a closet. And so a lot of the people that are based in Manhattan wind up recording in their closet. I see it all the time, and I hear it all the
yeah,
time. And it's wonderful. Yeah. And microphones don't have to be terribly expensive. I mean, sure, I'm using an expensive microphone plugged into an expensive interface that goes into my computer, but I do this professionally. I also have a microphone across the way from me here that's around $125. And it sounds almost as good as this one. Most people cannot hear the difference. In fact, if I do a little bit of work with my audio program, I can make it where you would not hear a difference between these two microphones. This one just allows me a little bit more ability to be my own. So it's not difficult to do. It just takes conscious awareness to make sure you're doing it right out of the gate.
right. So it's very affordable to get started. So that's the main thing that one major thing that new podcasters get wrong is the audio quality. And that's probably the number one priority when you're starting out, I would say, is the
Yeah.
sound quality audio. So what are the other two major mistakes that new podcasters make when they're launching their podcast, when they first launch?
Yeah, the one I have to bring up, the fact is, you as a new podcaster who's never done this before, you probably have no idea how much time this is going to take you. If you want to
Yeah,
have a 30-minute long podcast episode, you just need to understand something, that chances are it's not only going to take you 30 minutes to put that together. The last movie that you watched may have lasted 90 minutes, but I assure you, it took hundreds of people way more than 90 minutes to put that movie together. And making a podcast these days is something similar. Now, not nearly as bad, but 3 to 5 times is pretty standard to make a show. So understand there's a lot of effort that goes into it, so that you don't wind up realizing 3 or 4 episodes in, wow, this is a lot harder than I thought. You're going to say that regardless. So you might as well go into it assuming it's going to take
yeah,
you 4 or 5 times as long as you thought that it would. So that's a major mistake. And I think another mistake that people make when they start podcasting is they don't really listen to a lot of podcasts. And I mentioned there's millions of podcasts that are out there. And a lot of people who start podcasting for the first time or decide to start podcasting, they have a favorite show that they listen to. They say, I'm going to do that. Well, that's fine. You should totally do that. But maybe you should also start listening to lots of other shows to see what else is out there. Because look, if you pick any topic, I don't really care what the topic is. There is someone who has a podcast about it. Now, that doesn't mean you shouldn't do a podcast about it. I mean, if you want to do a podcast for, your appreciation for ring lights on videos, like I'm staring at as I'm talking to you on the camera here, that's fine. There are lots of video production podcasts out there. Try and listen to a lot of them. See what they're doing and what you can do different, number one, so you can bring something different to the conversation. But two, understand where your competition is. If the competition out there is super high-end production, it sounds great and amazing, well, you need to compete at that level. Are you able to do that? Or can you change your show, twist the idea and the topic format a little bit so that you don't have to spend sometimes tens of thousands of dollars each episode to make your show? Just listen to more content to make sure you really understand the space.
Yes, yes. It's the same as if you want to be a writer, you want to be a writer, you have to read a lot.
Yeah.
So is it the same with podcasting? You have to listen to a lot of podcasts and develop a kind of ear for what makes it a good podcast. What keeps you tuning in every week to listen to a podcast is a combination. It's storytelling, right? What would
Exactly.
you say is storytelling is what keeps people coming back to your podcast and not being monotone and having more? A lot of it depends on your voice too. How do you engage with the guest, or if you have a solo show, does it depend on voice quality too? Is that something the podcaster needs to be aware of, so they have inflection in their voice, not be monotone? Is that important?
Well, yes, but I want to make sure that we're clear on something. One of the most common terms, or one of the most common phrases I have heard over the 18 years now I've been doing this is, "I hate my voice." Um, if you've ever said that,
You?
no, people say that all the time. I don't, but people say that nonstop when they're on a podcast. When I see them at the Phoenix Podcast Club meetups that we have, or if I get messages from potential clients that want to make a show that are contacting my company, one of the things I hear really, really frequently is, "I hate my voice." And here's my answer to that question. So does everybody the first time they talk into a microphone. In fact, some people hate their voice the entire time they are talking on a microphone on a podcast. But here's the reality,
Yeah.
it's your voice. Nobody else feels that way. The voice you hear inside of your head is not the voice that goes into a microphone. That's one of the reasons why I wear these big headphones when I record, is I want to hear the way I sound to regular people out there, not just me. And it's something that you'll get over. Look, your voice is your voice. It is what it is. Every voice is worthy of being on a show. It doesn't matter if you've got crackle in your voice, if you think your voice is too high pitched or low pitched, your voice is fine for podcasting. Now, how you can make your voice more interesting, and you hit on it right there, is use some different intonation and inflections. Change the pacing of your voice. Learn to use the voice that you have to tell a story in a compelling way. You don't need a super deep, dark, rich voice to podcast. You just need to be able to use your voice to effectively communicate with another human being. And for almost everyone, that's the voice you have.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just like, there's always going to be things we don't like about ourselves, and our voice might be one of them. I've gotten used to my voice. It took a long time to be really comfortable with it, but what's helped me is going live every week. It's helped
Mm-hmm.
me get used to my voice, and there some people may not like it, and that's nothing to do with me. It's my voice. Take it or leave it. I think but I think that's a good thing to remember, is just to be comfortable with your voice when you're podcasting. And I think that comes with time also, the more you do it. You're
Yeah,
doing it
it
on a
certainly does.
schedule.
You'll
Yeah.
become comfortable with your voice and your style of speaking. Like I tell
Yeah.
people, talk to yourself. Seriously, before you get on a microphone, talk to yourself. My wife will come in the other room 3 or 4 times a week saying, "Are you talking to me?" Like, "Nope. I'm just talking to me. I'm working through something." and I'm speaking about it the way I would speak were I on a microphone, which sometimes has nothing to do with podcasting. Just get used to hearing your own voice, and yeah, you'll get over it. We all like your voice, honestly, seriously, we do. Just keep talking.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And so you've been in podcasting for 18 years now.
Oh,
Do you
yeah.
picture do you picture yourself doing anything else? If suddenly podcasting fell out of favor, people got sick of it, nobody was listening anymore. I doubt that's gonna happen. But if that happened, what do you see yourself doing?
Oh, wow. You know, if I'm fortunate for a lot of reasons, but in the podcasting space, when I started 18 years ago, we had no idea that what we were doing back in 2004 was going to turn into something we have today. I think everyone doing it underestimated the true power of podcasting at first. And then just a few years later, we all overestimated the power of podcasting. I have very many friends of mine who were starting out on podcasting as early as I was and wound up quitting their day jobs to go work in the business of podcasting way back, 15 years ago. And almost all of them had to leave the business of podcasting because the business of podcasting was not fully developed enough to actually prepare and carry people on through a true career. But we're starting to see that change. We've started to see that change, in the 2013, 2014 year. Professional studios came up. We saw, huge companies like Spotify come spend,
That's right.
millions of dollars acquiring lots of companies, and suddenly the business of podcasting was a very real and true thing, and it employs, I don't know how many people, thousands at least of people are working today in the business of podcasting. But we're seeing that shift once again. There's because the economy is a little uncertain these days is one way to see that. We're seeing a lot of retraction and there's layoffs happening at podcasting. So, it's become a dynamic industry. And for me, who's kind of ridden the wave of podcasting since the beginning, every 3 or 4 years, I change what my interest in podcasting is. And it keeps me interested, number one, because I'm doing something new and different every 3 to 5 years. And it's also lets me take advantage of new opportunities. So specifically to your question, no, I don't think that we're going to have a point where podcasting itself stops happening. It'll change. It'll continue to morph and become something different. I find myself fortunate enough that I will continue to morph and change along with it, at least for the next, 10 years or so. And then after that, I'm going to be an old man and I won't care.
Yeah, so that brings up, yeah, I agree with you. Podcasting is not going anywhere. There's going to be more people launching podcasts, people working in podcasting. I think it's going to grow even more. But that leads me to my next question. You you had a podcast episode earlier this year about incorporating video into podcasting, and you say it's going to be an important part of podcast, and it's something that every podcaster needs to incorporate. Um, do you think that video is going to become more prevalent in podcasting? And do you think every podcaster needs to do both audio and video?
That is a fun question to answer because, look, I'm going to sound like a politician on this, a wish-washy politician, but my opinion on video is constantly in flux. I believe the episode that I put out that you were talking about, I think one of the key points I stated was that video is becoming assumed
Mhm.
for a new wave of podcast listeners. We have something like 30% of the population listen to podcasts on a regular basis here in the States alone. And that's great. And by listen to podcast, I mean they listen to podcasts primarily. It's not a video medium. But there are still 70% of people who do not have podcast consumption as part of their daily diet. And a lot of them do have video consumption as a part of their daily diet. And for the last few years, it's been relatively simple, wrong word, relatively straightforward to record both audio and video remotely, as you and I are doing here. We're capturing both of those things. And so if you have both audio and video, you have the tools out to create episodes of both, and an episode that works in both formats. So that's the reality. But here's I think the real reality with video is making video is hard. Making compelling video is even harder than that. And there is a plethora of video shows that you're competing against out there that are just hard to compete against. This, fast paced, quick cuts, make interesting and compelling video. That's much harder to do when you're, well, for example, like we are doing an interview podcast right now, do super cuts or other sorts of things. So I think the point I was trying to make in that episode was that your guests, your new listeners, not guests, your new listeners, eventually are going to come to your podcast saying, why isn't there a video version? And if you have a compelling reason as to why there isn't a video version, that's fine. But if it could be done in video, your listeners, your new listeners, might want to become watchers instead. So it's worth looking at. It's definitely worth looking at. I wouldn't put a huge amount of effort. I mean, if that suddenly becomes, wow, I don't think I want to do that, then you don't have to do that. No one's forcing anyone to do it. I do not think that 30% of the people who listen to podcasts today are ever going to switch and become hardcore video consumers. I just don't think that's the case. I think audio is an amazing medium, and I think we should embrace it. I think we should continue making compelling audio people want to listen to and have no real desire to watch. And I think that stays with podcasting for a while.
Right. I love that response. Yes, it's totally up to the podcaster. I know that some Spotify and YouTube are, I think Twitter, they're encouraging they're starting giving the capability to create video podcasts now.
Yeah, they're creating a lot of video stuff, but those platforms have always been, they've never really liked audio, which irritates me to no end. I mean, Facebook and Twitter, podcasting predates. This is the thing a lot of people don't understand. Podcasting was out before Twitter. And when podcasting launched back in 2004, Facebook was only available to a handful of college students. Yet still, neither of those, and also it's podcasting is earlier than YouTube. YouTube didn't come around till later. But none of those platforms have ever embraced uploading audio-only content. And I think that's a huge mistake. Facebook dabbled with podcasting last year and then quickly abandoned it because they wanted to make the Second Life 2, that's what they call the metaverse. Twitter, even though Twitter started out as a podcasting client, the precursor company to Twitter was called Odeo, and it was a podcasting client. But they switched and pivoted, and we got Twitter out of it. And they've never really embraced uploading audio files. Okay. Yeah, and the same thing for YouTube. We were promised from YouTube. Well, promise is the wrong word. YouTube told us earlier this year that they were going to get heavy into podcasting, and we were all excited about the ability to possibly start uploading audio files to YouTube. But nope. They continue to disappoint every turn and just make it video only. So I don't think we can look to our social channels for a lot of help when it comes to audio. We just have to adapt our processes to continue to work with their platforms and what they want to do.
Okay. I know there are some podcasts that are on YouTube, but it's just a static image with a waveform. I mean, would you recommend that if someone doesn't want to do video, but they want to put their audio on YouTube? Do you think that's effective? Just having a static image on YouTube?
So that's the way it was done for years. Libsyn, one of the first and largest podcast hosting companies for, oh my gosh, at least 15 years now, has had the ability to create a static image video file. The podcaster uploads their audio file. They upload a 16:9 image during the process of creating their podcast episode, and Libsyn will automatically create and push to YouTube a video. And it is just what you said. It's even more basic. It's simply a static video, a static image. It never ever changes, and the audio just plays underneath it. Well, now we have companies like Headliner and others that are allowing us to make audiograms, which can be full length. You can make a 30-minute or a 60-minute long version that's just got a background image and it has the audio waveform bouncing around. You can also use captions, and you can actually put the words and they appear either as a subtitle or they appear in karaoke style, where each word that is being said is highlighted as it goes across the screen. And those can be uploaded to video. Those are perfectly acceptable because they take almost zero time. They take almost no effort. Apart from the initial creation and maybe some image creation, they don't take you any time as a podcaster to create. And for the handful of people who want to use YouTube as their primary podcast listening device, they put the phone down as they're driving in the car and they listen through Bluetooth, that's fine. You can do that
Yeah.
that way. So yes, to answer your question, I think that's perfectly acceptable. And I think most podcasts that don't want to build or don't have a need to build a truly compelling audio video of their content, perfectly fine just to use the static images or the audiograms and let that suffice for now.
Right, that makes sense. For podcasters that know they need to repurpose their audio, what would you say is the first step they should take to repurpose their audio? Would it be a transcript? Would it be video audiograms or articles? Like on your website, you have everything. You have an article, you have a video, and you have a transcript. And it's also accessible to screen readers, right? You have it set up in a way that is accessible to screen readers, but that's something that's more advanced, probably too advanced for the average podcaster. Unless
I actually don't. I'm going to push back on that. I don't think it's too advanced for podcasters. I mean, screen readers are pretty good tools these days, and as long as you're not doing weird design, making weird design choices you probably shouldn't be making unless you are a designer. Most out of the box website creation tools like WordPress, for example, I use something that's different than that, but nonetheless, WordPress will work. They're pretty accessible out of the box. So whatever web pages you built, they'll be accessible to screen readers. But I think also another thing, I think transcripts aren't optional. I think if you're a podcaster and you have a podcast episode, you should make your transcript available to people. And I do that as well, as you've noticed. So, but when you talk about repurposing, then the question becomes, well, how else would people want to enjoy your content? For me, I've chosen an article, which I take the literal words I spoke into the microphone every time I do a show, and I take that transcript and I rewrite it. Almost every single word gets rewritten. I consider what I said in audio as my rough draft, if you will, and then I clean it up in article form. And I do that for a couple of reasons. You know, one, we read content differently than we hear content. We also can do things in a written text that we just simply can't do in audio. Like I can put headings. I can occasionally put an image or a graph or something like that in an article and read. But I create my articles of my show so that you do not have to listen to the podcast. You can just read my article and get the same intent. And I am fine with that. In fact, here's a weird thing. More people read my articles either on my website or because I send them out via an email. More people read my articles than listen to my podcast episodes. And my show is about podcasting, which is amazing. My show is designed for podcasters, but still most people prefer, or I should say more people prefer to read the article than listen. And that's for a lot of reasons, but I do it that way. So that's the first thing I would suggest is for most podcasters, create an article that is something that you can email to people who want to subscribe to your email because maybe they don't have time to listen. It's also really good for Google and other sort of search engines. It's much easier for them to index content that is available in written form, and more than just a transcript, by the way, but a full written article. It works out really well. And then it's also for people who truly are, who have hearing loss. They can choose to listen to the transcript, which I post. It's an exact transcript and cleaned up for a little bit of my mistakes occasionally. Or they can read the full article, and both of those are available. And I don't really care which one. So when it comes to repurposing, just think of where does your audience going to want most from you? Where can you reach people that you can't reach any other way, and start working in that direction?
Right. I love that. I wish a lot more podcasters do that. But the biggest pet peeve I have about transcripts is they just automatically create a transcript and then post
Yeah.
it. And I think that looks so unprofessional, sloppy, and really lazy, to be honest.
It
Just
is, yeah.
have somebody edit it, and um, it shouldn't take that long if you're on top of it every week. If you have a
Yeah.
weekly podcast or every 2 weeks. So I wanted to say, when we were talking about audio to YouTube, and DJ, hi DJ, thank you for being here this morning. She was asking about audio rooms or Clubhouse. She was referring to when Twitter has audio rooms and then Clubhouse. Do you see Clubhouse having any dominance at all?
I mean, when's the last time you heard Clubhouse mentioned other than right here, right? Clubhouse is kind of dying on the vine,
Right,
I think.
right.
But Twitter Spaces, there are a lot of these social audio
Yes,
spaces.
I have
They're a
seen that.
drop
Yeah,
in, yeah, and they're quite interesting. I see a lot of Twitter Spaces happening, which is, if you're not familiar with these, it is a room where a bunch of people gather on Twitter, but they're the only thing you can hear things. You can see names in a list. You can see who's speaking. You can handle, push an emoji here and there, but it is just simply audio, and it's audio from phones mostly. In fact, it takes effort to get a good microphone plugged into it, because it only works on your mobile device. You can't do it through the browser interface. And I
right.
think those are interesting. Those have been around for a couple of years now, and I think what social audio spaces and drop-in audio really appreciated was the pandemic. The rest of us didn't appreciate the pandemic all that much, but those services did, because we were all locked in our homes. We were craving for human connection, and then podcasting was great for that. But these are live. These audio spaces are live, and it was a great way to do that. And there was a huge buzz around that. I was on them for a while. I did a lot of things on Clubhouse. I did a lot of things on Twitter Spaces. I even dinked around with Spotify's Green Room and a few others in there. But you don't hear about them nearly as much now, because we're once again getting out. We're doing more things, and
Yeah,
it's just people talking. Live call-in shows sound like they're a lot of fun, but they're also a lot of work. And you can come in the middle and not know what the heck is going on, much like you turn on the radio in the middle of a show and you don't know what's going on for a
yeah,
while. Well, radio hosts are very good at letting you know what's going on, because they've been trained to do that live. These live audio rooms aren't quite as they're not, all of the hosts to do this aren't quite as good at it. So people drop in and drop out because they don't know exactly what the heck is going on. Look, I think there's something there. I don't think they're going away anytime real soon. I think it's a great way to have a chat. But people who are predicting that audio spaces and these social drop-in audio rooms are going to replace podcasting, I haven't listened to a lot of those spaces, because they're not going to replace podcasting anytime soon. But they're a perfectly fine thing to do. So if you want to do that, keep on keeping on.
right, right. I don't see them as a replacement either. It's like something, even if you jump in the middle of the conversation on Twitter Spaces, it's a lot more casual. Although
Very.
some podcasters have regular Twitter Spaces every
Mm-hmm.
week,
Mm-hmm.
like
Mm-hmm.
Podcast Seriously has one every week, I think.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so they plan those out, I think, but I don't see them replacing. And what's good is they have auto captions if you want to tune in. They have automatic
Yeah.
captions, and also the audio rooms on LinkedIn have auto captions also. They should,
Nice.
but they're not too bad. They can be improved, but
Yeah.
they are
Yeah.
getting better. Yeah.
I think they're great. The way you're talking about it right now is the right way to think about it. How can you use this as an
Hmm.
extension of your podcast? As not repurposing your content, but are there things that don't make sense to do on your podcast that might make sense to do if you can get 5, 15, 500 people together in an audio room in a live setting? live podcasting is a thing. I just went to a live podcast recording last week, and it was a lot of fun. I mean, it was it really a podcast recording? Well, no, but it kind of felt like that, and it was like more like an old timey radio drama thing, and those were a lot of fun. I encourage all podcasters to go, move out from your studio or your closet, whatever, and take your show to another style and format and expose people to it that makes sense for that style or format. You don't have to do the exact same thing. I mean, really, nobody wants to watch you record your podcast in your closet. I mean, nobody wants to show up at your house, open the door, and watch you record a podcast. But they might find other parts about your process interesting, or they might have other things you want to talk about that are interesting. And an audio room like a Clubhouse or Twitter Spaces might make a great place for you to do that.
Yeah. It's like a supplement to your podcast almost. Like you can create a room for your listeners, have like a Q&A back and forth with your listeners on Twitter Spaces. I think podcasters can really take advantage of that.
All good
Twitter
ideas.
on Twitter Spaces.
Mm-hmm.
So Evo, what do you think contributes to podcasters just stopping the podcast? They stop recording, or maybe they want to take a break. If you want to take a break from podcasting and maybe get back to it eventually, um, do you think that's safe to do, wise to do if you're a podcaster?
Yeah, we tend to call that pod fading, where the podcast just kind of fades out,
Podcast.
and usually it's the interest of the podcaster that fades out over time. But let's talk about it in two ways. Let me answer your question directly. Look, if you're a podcast, it's important for a podcast to be consistent. One of the best ways, I think, to build an audience, not the only way, but one of the best ways to build an audience is to be consistent with your content. But everybody recognizes that you're a human being. And a break is not a bad thing. In fact, a break is a very good thing for your own mental health, and also to let your guests, your listeners, take a break for a moment as well. So I'm a big fan of taking breaks. I used to do podcast Pontifications as a daily show. There were 4 days a week: Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. I took off on Friday, but I would take a break.
I don't know how
I,
you did that.
I don't know
I
how
have
I did that either.
4 days a week. That's a lot.
I honestly don't either. But I would take off the month of June, which was my birthday month, and I would also take off November and December. And so, it was really only 9 months a year that the show came out every day, and that was very helpful. And I wouldn't say there was anything negative to that. What I did to make sure it worked is I would let my listeners know. I didn't want to surprise them. I didn't want to just not be there 1 week, 2 weeks, and 3 weeks, making them wonder exactly what happened. So no, when I got closer and closer to the time I was taking a break, I would let them know it's coming up in 2 weeks, and in 1 week, this is happening. And I would let people know that it was coming. And once you do that, then people know. You just sit back and you relax and you wait because you're subscribed, you're following the show, and it's automatic. So it's very good for the mental health for you, the podcaster, to take a break. Just keep your audience apprised of what's going on. Try not to surprise them. Sometimes things happen, you have to surprise them, and it is very okay. If life happens to you, something terrible, and you can't get to the studio for the next few weeks, just grab your phone and record a very short, "Hey, friends, it's me. I've had something bad happen, or other things are in my way right now. I can't get a show out. I appreciate you staying subscribed. Thank you very much. Goodbye." And loading that so that your people who are subscribing
Right.
know what's happened to you. Just keep people informed and take all the breaks you want. Breaks are a wonderful, wonderful thing.
So CJ said not to mention a hurricane can keep you from recording the podcast. She's in
Right.
Florida and she does live streaming every week on LinkedIn and other platforms. So but
Yeah.
she also took a break from live streaming. So I think that's wise too. But
Yes.
like you said, inform your subscribers, let them know if something came up suddenly even, and just record something short and let your subscribers know. I think that's a great idea.
Yep.
So, so So, Evo, my one last question, which I'm asking about the question. So, what do you think makes a successful podcast? It's not just the number of subscribers, right?
Oh gosh, no. In fact, you never know that number. I mean, the reality is none of us know how many people are subscribed to our show because that's not the only way people download or get our content. And nor is looking at downloads, I think, what matters for
Mhm.
success because a download doesn't tell you about anything other than a computer somewhere requested something from your hosting computer service. And that's,
Yeah,
so that's not
yeah.
good. Success is inherently personal. What are you trying to do? What is your ultimate goal? For some podcasts, they have a podcast to make money, and so are you doing that? Are you bringing in more income than you are spending? And also to a number that continues to make sense for you to do this year after year. Truly running it as a business. That's great. I know a lot of people who are business minded who never want to make any money with their podcast, but they use their podcast kind of as an extended business card, if you will, to really prove out
Mhm.
their
Exactly.
expertise. A lot of people I know with podcast use their podcast as a lead generation tool. They'll invite guests on to their program in the hopes that some of those guests might actually become clients because they've got services that they're looking for. That works. But I also know a whole lot of people who are podcasting for fun, who've got things that they want to say. And the fact that people are continuing to listen in week after week, whether that's 10 people or 100 people or 1,000, it kind of doesn't matter what the right number is. If the people are engaging with your content, and for podcasting, we have to remember engagement is mostly listening. That's really the only engagement a lot of people need to have with a podcast. In fact, most of the engagement I give with podcasts, and I listen to a lot of podcasts, is simply me listening. And for a lot, that's certainly enough. You don't have to do anything more than that. Then that's what success means. What it takes to be successful is knowing what you want to achieve with your podcast and tracking to make sure you're doing that. So if you don't have a goal with your podcast, great. It's successful as soon as you launch it. But if you do have a goal, make sure that you're able to track to that goal and continue to modify and change to where you're hitting that goal, and you can be successful too.
Right, right. I do think if you have a business already, if you have a business and then you launch a podcast, it's a good extension of your business, and it's another major way. It's just a marketing tool for your business, whether it's for lead generation or showing your expertise in your field. I think that's what podcasting is really good for. And now, if you just starting out wanting to make money, it's going to be really tough in the
Mm.
beginning, I would think. So I think
Yeah.
that should never be your primary goal when you're launching a podcast. So,
I
so
mean,
I
it
love,
certainly can be, but that you need to have realistic goals for that. If your
yeah.
plan is to make money, you need to understand how. If your plan is launch podcast, make money, you need to figure out that middle part.
Yeah, yeah. So I just want to recap the accessibility of podcasts. The
Yeah,
um, one good way to start diversifying your audio is to start with the transcript and edit it right. And then
definitely.
and then what's the next thing to do? An audiogram or the captions or something else, an article like we were talking about before.
Well, the great thing is starting with a transcript, which again, I'm going to make a bold statement once again. I don't think in
Uh-huh.
2022, when we're recording this, I do not think transcripts are optional. I think they are required. If
Right.
you are going to make a podcast, I admonish you to make sure you're putting a transcript out there. And I know that might be difficult for you, but figure it out. It's just, you're not going to open up a restaurant tomorrow and not put a handicap ramp in. So, same thing. You're launching a podcast, you need to have a transcript. It needs to be accessible.
Yeah.
But with that corrected transcript, that human corrected transcript, you can do so much with it. You can actually, we now have a tag that many podcast hosting companies will allow you to use that lets you upload that transcript with your audio. So if a person who
Right.
has hearing loss is listening on a podcast app that allows it, they can see that in that closed caption style. You can also use that same transcript to generate a true video closed caption file to go with your video that you upload, whether it's you talking into a microphone to a camera like I do with my show every week. You can put the words right there, or it's just that audiogram or static image. You can at least have the words appearing of that one. That goes above and beyond for making your podcast accessible to everyone. That's number one. The second thing I would think of, and probably you might want to do this in different orders, but again, I think that a transcript is so important. The second thing is make sure that your audio is clear. Make sure that the words you are speaking and your guests or your co-host or the other people who are on the show, making sure those are all a consistent, nice volume level. There's separation between the voices, so we're not a bunch of people talking over the top of other people. You've put the work in to make sure that the audio is clear and listenable, because there are a lot of people out there with hearing loss. I'm one of them who would love to listen to more podcasts with lots of people on them, but the audio just gets muddy and jumbled up together because someone didn't take the time to make sure that didn't happen. So make sure that your audio is clear and legible, just like you would if you're printing a book. You wouldn't use a super light gray font on against a background. You'd use a dark, super dark font on a white page background so that it's nice and separation. Do the same thing in audio. Just make sure we can hear it. That's the important thing.
Right, right. That's great. Um, can you give me any examples of podcasts that you listen to that have really terrific audio quality? Are you allowed to mention them?
Yeah, I certainly can. So I'm going to change the conversation a bit and give you some the way I want to talk about this is through my current and longtime love in podcasting, which is fiction podcasts. Fiction podcasts, audio dramas, you might think of them that way, are notorious for being difficult to listen to because they do have so many different voices, and they're trying to
Yes,
recreate
I
something that really
imagine.
happened in the outside. But there are some great ones. Some do an amazing job of making sure that the audio is clear. These engineers spend hours on this because quite often the actors are in totally different locations around the globe, and they need to make them sound like they're in the same room or the same truck driving down the road together, and that's got to be a real challenge. But some of the best ones do a very good job of making that happen. I keep a list of outstanding fiction podcasts so you can really hear what I'm talking about. I keep that list over at Podchaser. I'll send you a link so you can put it inside of the show notes, or you can just go to theend.fyi. It's a new newsletter I'm putting, and at the top there's a link that says Evolicious podcast fiction or fiction podcasts, and that's my list of like
Oh,
90 some odd shows that sound great. So yeah, go to theend.fyi and click that link and you'll see that.
right, right. I have the link for Evo's fiction podcast. It's more of a curation, right,
Yeah,
Evo?
that's what I'm doing
It's
with
a
the
curation
end.
of,
Yeah. I'm basically every week I put out a newsletter that features 4 outstanding fiction podcasts that are complete, so that you're not worried about listening to 3 episodes and then being on a 3-month hiatus until they put the next episode out. No, these are either complete at the season or the series level. And then also there's a couple of other sections on the podcast, on the newsletter, of shows that have recently completed. And now I've just started doing shows that are soon to start back up again. So it's basically it's if you want to really dig into it and listen to it and just plow through an entire season or series of a show, this is the newsletter to get that'll show you which ones are ready for you to grab.
wonderful, wonderful. And in the post below on LinkedIn, I have a link to Evo's Fiction Podcast Twitter account, The End. So you can find that link in the post below on LinkedIn. So go check it out. And I didn't realize that you have a newsletter for The End, the
Yeah.
fiction podcast curation. So I should
Yep.
add that later. So, okay, we're coming up on 10 minutes before 9. Is there anything you'd like to add that we
Hey,
haven't talked about?
I think we've covered a lot of ground. I appreciate you asking me to be on the show and talk about this. I'm keenly interested in making podcasting better, and I think the more conversations we can have about
Yes.
that really helps do that. Like I said, I'm excited and bullish about the future of podcasting. We've got some rocky road ahead of us, but then again, so does everybody. So,
Yes.
but I do think we'll
Mhm.
power through, and I'm excited to see what's next, what the new wave of creators is going to come up with. Because man, the space is changing and has changed so much in the 18 years I've been involved with it.
Mhm.
It's so exciting
Yes.
to see where we're headed from a technology point of view, and also from a content creation point of view and a creativity point of view. It's just so exciting to be a part of this community as much as this industry.
Yeah, I can really see how enthusiastic you are about podcasting, which is really great to see. I just want to say, DJ has to run, but she wanted to say, Evo, you rock. Nice to meet you. Hope I see you again.
Thanks,
So that
DJ.
was nice. Thank you, DJ, for being here this morning. So, Eva, I just want to thank you for being here this morning
Sure.
and for sharing everything you know about podcasting. And I agree with you, the podcasting will be here for a really long time.
Yeah. Yeah,
So, if
it will.
you are a new podcaster looking to launch, start creating the transcript with your first episode. And that is necessary and need to have one. Okay, so keep that in mind. And next week, I'm going to have another guest to talk about accessibility. No, not about accessibility. She's in November. Yes, it is about accessibility. But
More.
I'm all jumbled with October, November. Anyway, okay, thank you so much, Eva. And thank you, everyone, for being here this morning. And have a great day.
Thanks, Juana. Bye bye.
Bye bye.